The rural winter sleep method, well, it worked without central heating. Before there were electric furnaces, thermostats, or gas lines, rural families got through winters that most folks today would probably call unlivable. They didn't rely on keeping a fire going all night, and yeah, they didn't freeze either. What they did was practice a disciplined, layered sleep system that was all about insulation, managing body heat, and keeping airflow under control. This wasn't just some old folklore or a comfort ritual. It was a method, really, one that was refined by necessity, by climate, and by generations of trial and error. And, understanding this matters because it explains how people managed to sleep safely through winters when indoor temperatures barely crept above freezing, and how those same principles still do better than a lot of modern solutions when there's a power outage or fuel shortage. Homes were, by design, allowed to cool at night. Rural households didn't try to keep their interiors warm through the night. Fires were just let to burn down after the evening chores were wrapped up. This saved fuel and, honestly, cut down the risk of fire while everyone was sleeping. The thinking wasn't about keeping the room warm, but about keeping the sleeper warm. Bedrooms would often drop close to whatever the temperature was outside, sometimes just barely above freezing. What made all this survivable, though, was that heat loss was managed at the body level, not by trying to heat the whole house. This is, well, something you can use right now. If the grid goes down in the winter, wasting fuel to try and heat the whole house overnight just isn't efficient. Letting the house cool off while you get your body ready for the cold has been proven by history, and honestly, it's a whole lot safer. Bed placement was all about minimizing heat loss and avoiding drafts. Beds weren't just put anywhere. Folks made sure to keep them away from outside walls, windows, and doors if they could. A lot of rural homes put beds up against interior walls that shared heat with other rooms or maybe a chimney. And when there was enough space, sleeping areas got moved closer to the center of the house. That way, you got less exposure to cold air sneaking in and lost less heat through the walls. So, a modern application is pretty straightforward. In a cold house, you want to sleep in the most interior room you've got. You should avoid basements that have cold floors unless they're insulated. And honestly, even just moving your bed about 3 feet away from an exterior wall can really make a big difference in how much heat you lose overnight. Elevated sleeping surfaces actually mattered more than blankets did. One thing folks often overlook is that rural sleepers rarely slept directly on the floor. Beds were raised up, sometimes just a little, sometimes by quite a bit. See, cold floors act like heat sinks. Using straw mattresses, rope beds, or thick wooden frames helped cut down on conductive heat loss. Even the poorest households knew that having insulation underneath your body was more important than just piling it on top. This principle, well, it really does apply to emergency winter sleeping today. If you're sleeping in a cold structure, having insulation underneath you is just critical. A folded blanket, a piece of cardboard, pine boughs, or even some stacked clothing under your sleeping pad can be the difference between holding onto your heat or slowly losing it all through the night. Layered bedding trapped heat without restricting movement. Rural bedding was layered deliberately. A coarse bottom layer provided structure and trapped air. Mid layers added bulk and insulation. Top layers sealed heat in. Wool was preferred because it retained warmth even when damp. Feather beds, where available, were prized not for softness but for their ability to trap heat efficiently. The key detail is that layers were adjusted, not piled blindly. Too much compression reduces insulation. Bedding was arranged to allow air pockets while still sealing around the body. Feet were often given extra layers because extremities lose heat fastest. A practical modern application is avoiding tight sleeping bags or overcompressing blankets. Looser layering with breathable materials performs better than a single heavy layer that restricts circulation. Night clothing was part of the system, not an afterthought. People did not sleep naked in winter. They also did not sleep fully dressed in day clothes. Night garments were dry, loose, and designed to hold warmth without trapping moisture. Linen or wool nightshirts were common. Damp clothing was never worn to bed. Moisture was a threat because it stripped heat from the body. This remains critical knowledge. Before sleeping in cold conditions, change into dry clothing even if it feels inconvenient. Avoid cotton if possible, as it holds moisture. Loosen belts and restrictive garments to maintain circulation. This alone can prevent hypothermia in marginal conditions. Head and neck insulation prevented overnight heat collapse. Rural sleepers covered their heads. Nightcaps, scarves, or folded cloth were used to prevent heat loss through the scalp and neck. This was not about comfort, but survival. The body loses a disproportionate amount of heat through these areas, especially during sleep when metabolism slows. Today, many people underestimate this. Wearing a wool cap or insulating the neck while sleeping in cold conditions can drastically improve warmth without adding heavy blankets. Enclosed bed structures, really amplified body heat. In colder regions, folks often used enclosed sleeping structures. Box beds, curtained beds, and alcove beds all help trap body heat and block out drafts. These weren't just luxuries, but practical thermal tools for everyday life. Even just some simple curtains around a bed could create a little microclimate that stayed a whole lot warmer than the rest of the room. A modern equivalent, it's tenting a sleeping area inside a cold room using blankets or tarps, just making sure there's still enough ventilation. This way, you're reducing the volume of air that needs to be warmed up by your body. Controlled airflow now, that was key to preventing dampness and sickness. Even with the cold, rooms weren't sealed up airtight. You always needed a bit of airflow to keep moisture from breath and sweat from building up. Stale, damp air could really increase the risk of illness and made insulation less effective. So, rural homes found a balance between warmth and ventilation, often with small vents or just loosely fitted shutters. This is still relevant. Completely sealing a sleeping space can actually lead to condensation and heat loss over time. Controlled ventilation, on the other hand, helps preserve warmth while keeping things dry. Heat was banked into the body before sleep. Evening routines really mattered. Folks would eat warm, calorie-dense meals before bed. Physical work earlier in the evening helped raise body temperature naturally, and sometimes hot bricks or stones wrapped in cloth were placed near the feet to give some initial warmth, but not for all-night heating. So, today, a warm meal before bed, a little bit of light movement, and just pre-warming the sleeping area for a short while can honestly make a big difference in keeping heat overnight, without having to use fuel all night long. All of this, it forms a system, not just a single trick or shortcut. Let the house cool. Position the bed correctly. Insulate underneath first. Layer your bedding in a smart way. Wear dry night clothing. Insulate the head. Reduce the air volume around you. Maintain ventilation. Warm the body before sleep. When you put all these together, this method is what kept rural families alive through winters, without central heating, electricity, or any kind of modern insulation. In a power outage, fuel shortage, or if you're living off-grid, this knowledge isn't just some old curiosity. It's real operational survival guidance that's already been tested over centuries. So, why does this matter for Warfield Prepper Chronicles viewers? This is the sort of knowledge that tends to disappear when convenience replaces necessity. It doesn't rely on technology, fancy products, or modern infrastructure. It's all about understanding heat, the human body, and the environment. That's exactly why it stays relevant, reliable, and honestly, easy to teach. If this guide added something new to your understanding of historical survival or just practical preparedness, go ahead and support the channel by subscribing to Warfield Prepper Chronicles. Share this with folks who value real knowledge over just theory. These methods, they truly deserve to be preserved, practiced, and passed on.